The deaths of 17 people at Angelo informal settlement in Boksburg has not only left the nation reeling, but once again shone the spotlight on illegal miners. Now, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says the province is under siege when it comes to illegal mining. It's believed the cause of the incident is a nitrate oxide gas leakage from a cylinder used in illegal mining activities. While there have been calls for the industry to be formalized, there are still some serious concerns about the dangers as well in this particular instance. Now, Sifiso Dladla, ActionAid, SA Mining and Extractives, is joining us in studio. David van Wyk, lead mining analyst and Benchmark Foundation's lead researcher, is on the line. Thank you so much to you both for your time. I'll begin with you, David. When it comes to, of course, the illegal mining situation, there's clearly a market here. What are they selling? Who is buying?
Well, they are selling gold that they're extracting from old mines. These mines are no longer economically viable for large-scale industrial mining, but they are still viable for small and medium-scale mining. And we should have started planning 15, 20 years ago for medium and smaller-scale mining. At the moment, if you go to any of these sites, you will find around the corner there will be a scrap metal dealer. And so when a mine gets abandoned, it usually gets occupied by informal settlers. The informal settlers strip the metal from the mine, and all of this ends up with scrap metal dealers, and eventually they go underground and they then extract the gold from underground. Now, very often these are workers that have been abandoned by the mining companies themselves. And speaking to small-scale miners or zamazamas, however we want to call them, they say very often the companies that abandon the mine actually buys the gold from them. So it is scrap metal dealers, sometimes it's security companies, sometimes it's subcontractors and labor brokers, sometimes it is scrap metal dealers. And wherever you go along Main Reef Road, where there's illegal mining, you'll find the local scrap metal dealer just around the corner. Yeah. Interestingly, I also did work in Colombia, in South America, and I found exactly the same thing happening there with a bright yellow and black board saying we.
All right, it looks like we've lost David a little bit there, but Sifiso, it sounds like a lucrative business. We've seen it over time. We've heard about what's going on through various research done. But really, when you listen to what David is saying, this is a business and there's a high demand.
Of course, Bongi, good evening to your viewers. There's always been money. And as a result, you see that through the amount of ammunition and guns that are there, and the turf wars that take place, fighting for territory. So it's what we term as mineral criminals, because these are not the zamazamas that we are advocating for, to say government must formulate a policy or a piece of legislation. Parliament must do that to address the unemployment in the industry as well as in the country. So here we are talking about people who want to enrich themselves. Within a month, they make millions. Hence, they bring people. And there's a huge belief that there are high-profile politicians that are gaining from all of this, as well as large-scale mining is gaining from this, because if you're buying from artisanal miners, you do not mine. Imagine the process of mining, having to blast the machinery and all the costs that come there. But if you just get it there from the black market, it's much more cheaper.
There's two questions that I have just at the back of what you've said, but let me stay with your last part. So you claim very powerful people are involved in this particular space. Is this verified, but also is that why we cannot seem to solve this problem?
It's not verified, but knowing South Africa and the way things happen in South Africa, you know when there's a political figure involved. And the reason why we're not paying attention to this, it's because they have the power of deciding what happens, the political will and the political power. So if you were to address this by decriminalizing it, formalizing it and regulating it, it means you'll be taking money out of somebody's pockets. For example, let's look at the taxi industry. It is formalized, but it still operates informally, because there are taxis that are operating without licenses. But who's ensuring that that happens is the associations. So this is why the role of the National Association of Artisanal Miners will be critical, because if all were to be regulated, we would know people would be then by law forced to be part of a cooperative. And when you're a cooperative, then you are registered within the cooperative, and everybody within the industry. By the way, Bongi, everybody loses through artisanal mining, because even the Zamazamas themselves are not getting what they should be getting. Even large-scale miners are losing because the Zamazamas sometimes get into these mines, and sometimes you find that the security guards within these mines are paid by these kingpins to allow Zamazamas to be in.
How do you begin to regulate an industry where it has been saturated by guns? High-powered machinery and weaponry. Now, how do you begin then to sift the criminals from the real small-scale farmers?
There's never been a platform where government brings all the role players. We need state security that should be there, should understand what is happening. They should have a grip on what's happening. We need law enforcement. We need Department of Home Affairs for the migration and immigration. And we need institutions like your CSSR. We need institutions like your Council of Geosciences. We need institutions like your Mineral Councils of South Africa. And most importantly, we need the Zamazamas themselves, and we need members of the community.
And I do understand that David is now back on the line. David, one of the things that Sifiso was talking about is the regulations around this particular industry, and saying that you need to sift the criminals from the real small-scale farmers. But one of the other things is that with gang wars that are seemingly at play here as well, how do you begin to sift? Because this looks like it's now dangerous territory, even for those around, these particular gangs to even live around, but even to try and regulate.
Well, I think that first of all, we need to do an audit of all these Zamazama operations that are there in the country, and we also then need to do an analysis of which mines are safe to mine and which ones are not safe to mine, because some of them are not safe. We need to draft a policy, and we worked on a policy with the Legal Resource Centre, with ILRIC, with the National Association of Artisanal Miners, which we submitted to the DMRE, and then that thing that happened in Krugersdorp happened, and then everybody just shifted off. All the negotiations and discussions we had off the table. We said that we need to create business units with these guys. We need to create specific uniforms and registration processes. We need to have a central buying agency that buys all the gold from them, so that the gold doesn't get sold to syndicates or to former mining companies and so on. I think that then, when you buy the gold, you buy it at slightly less than the global price, so that you can create a fund through which fund you can then appoint engineers, geologists, safety officers, and so on, that you can attach to 5 or 10 groups of cooperatives or business units or whatever units you want to establish there. We always talk about entrepreneurship. These guys are taking huge risks, and therefore they are the real entrepreneurs in this country. And we really need to begin to recognize that and organize them accordingly. And communities around them, instead of being afraid of them, can actually benefit from that business that comes out of there. You can create small jewelry factories, you can create supply side for check clothing, for food, and all kinds of things for these operations. But you need to plan to transition from large-scale industrial mining to smaller scale and medium mining. You need to plan for a post-mining economy. Mining is not sustainable, mining is not renewable.
So very briefly, there are calls now for, by the Angelo informal settlement community that they believe that, and the army coming in is going to be able to resolve this particular problem. But it does seem like South Africa has a huge problem when it comes to this. So can the army assist?
That will only be part of it for a very few days. You can't have the army there around the clock. Government has employed a lot of resources trying to curb and intercept the operations, but it hasn't worked. So for years, we've been doing the same thing over and over again. The only thing that will be an answer to all of this, because more lives are lost, revenue is lost, and everything else in between is lost. Decriminalize it, formalize it, and regulate it.
It sounds like a conversation, a broader conversation must be had about this one with all the role players at the table, just to try and get to the bottom of what's going on here. What are some of the easy wins that South Africa should be looking at here in order to curb what we are seeing in some of our communities? Let me thank you both for your time. That is Sifiso Dladla, ActionAid SA Mining and Extractives lead, as well as David van Wyk. He is a mining analyst and Benchmarks Foundation lead researcher.